Hey everyone, you're listening to the Visually Stunning Movie Podcast, the place to come if you just want some good old-fashioned talk about movies. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter, VS Movie Podcast. You can just go to the website, vsmoviepodcast.com. We're on Google Podcasts, we're on Apple News, we're on Stitcher, we're on Spotify. Basically, you can find us pretty much anywhere you want to listen to us. We appreciate you listening. If you want to throw us a like, follow us on any of those outlets, and share us with your friends. We'd really appreciate it. And don't forget, if the best thing you can say about a movie is that it is visually stunning, then the filmmakers have done something dreadfully wrong. Now, let's get on with the show. Hey everyone, Mark here. Welcome back to the Visually Stunning Movie Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. This week, Ryan and I are going to talk about the second entry in the horror genre by one Jordan Peele after last year's, I think it was last year, Get Out, which was ridiculous. 2 years ago. He won the Oscar last year.
Yeah.
All right. So this is called Us, and if you've seen the commercials, you already know that it's creepy. And Ryan and I actually saw the same screening, which happens about half the time. But we actually exchanged a few words leaving, which we don't normally do.
They were all vulgar.
Mine were vulgar. You're the little angel in this podcast. You said don't overthink this movie. Yet.
Not the first time. Not the first time.
No, it's so. What do you mean by that? Generally speaking.
What I mean, generally speaking, by that is going in. If you're trying to figure out the subtext, you're going to miss out on what makes the movie actually enjoyable. And what I mean by that is, this is a little more straightforward horror than Get Out was.
Yeah.
And I mean, the thing about Get Out was, it was very, very much a social commentary. I think there is that in this as well. But I think if you get so wrapped up the first time you're watching in trying to figure out exactly what that social commentary is, because there's a lot of different theories that you could go on that, and I just think that you're going to miss out on what makes the movie kind of just a fun little horror film.
Okay, that's good to know, because I wasn't trying to figure out the subtext, so to speak. I wanted to get a general sense of what he was trying to do. And once they get to the house and the beach, you've basically figured out that it is pretty much a straightforward horror film.
With comedic beats.
Actually, there's a lot more comedic beats in this than there were in Get Out. A lot more. And I often have a problem with movies that jump back and forth, but horror is one of those genres where you can have comedy just liberally sprinkled throughout your thing, because one of the ways that people deal with fear is through comedy. Yeah. And it's a coping mechanism. So horror is one of those genres where I'm really kind of okay with that, as long as you don't just go all the way over the top, unless you're doing something like Cabin in the Woods, which is meant to be dialed all the way up. But this is a really, really solid entry into the horror genre. I don't think there's a horror fan out there that would be displeased with this movie.
Unless they're upset by gender issues.
See, and I don't even... Because even horror, there's always, like, let's talk horror tropes. Let's talk about, there's always the weak female, quote unquote, who gets chased around and bloodied and almost killed. A lot of the times in horror, that one is the one that turns around and becomes... So it's not unusual to have a quote-unquote strong female lead in a horror film.
No, but I think and I don't feel this way, but I think the gender roles in this film are, again, this is overthinking it. This is probably best for like a second or third viewing. Anyway, the gender dynamics in this film are very interesting to me. And there are, well, I guess essentially four married couples.
Yeah.
And the relationships in all of those couples is what? A particular way. Anyway, we'll just leave it at that. It didn't bother me, but I could see how someone could get up in arms about that.
You know what? That I just looked at, but our two main married couples. I actually that's just relationship humor.
Oh, sure.
All the way. I mean, gender be damned, because it doesn't matter which way you flip. Basically, any of those comments or points of view or anything in those relationships, and it's going to work exactly the same way. Because that's just there's relationship dynamics, and they're different in every relationship, and yet they're the same in every relationship. So that doesn't even. But again, someone's going to have to try really hard to not like this movie.
They'll try.
Oh, you know what?
I don't know. I don't know that they will. Yeah.
If people put as much effort into enjoying themselves as they do to really going, and we've talked about this, going after any film to find something to complain about, or just we've talked, movies now are either the best thing since sliced bread, or the biggest steaming pile of dog shit ever committed to celluloid, or
that somehow has gone back and erased the previous 30 years of cinematic. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, anyway.
So, but that's where we have apparently come to now as a. But so if you want to watch this movie and say it's a steaming pile of dog shit, well, you're wrong, A, but B, man, you're missing out. You're missing out. There's so much good stuff in this movie. And I was laughing at points in here because not at the comedy stuff, but that's how I cope with fear. I do it all. Put me on a thrill ride somewhere, and I'm giggling like I'm a 6-year-old girl, just trying to cope with the fact that I might die. And I caught myself doing that. Just a couple spots. I'm just where the movie got me, and there's not a lot of shock horror in the jump scares.
No, and it's not. Oh, there is gore, but I wouldn't say it's overly gory either.
No, the goriest thing we didn't even get to see because it was underwater.
Yeah, I think
that was so great.
Yeah, well, and that's the irony. One of the goriest scenes in the film is also probably kind of one of the funniest. Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's a weird balance, but it's a beat that's played pretty perfectly, and so you get two for the price of one on that particular moment.
Yeah, this is a worthy successor to Get Out, in the horror genre. I think it's a lot more generally accessible than Get Out was. I did have a couple. Some of the words we traded. I did. It's not enough to make me not like the movie, but I did have a problem with a couple spots, and I won't say which spots or where because then I don't want to ruin it for everybody else. There were a couple things where I felt like I don't want to say he took the easy way out, because it's not easy to do what he did in this movie, but I kind of felt like he was riffing, and I don't it didn't ruin the movie for me, but I saw it and it bothered me in the moment. And that's going to stick with me for a while. Is that in that moment I was like, oh, and I was having such a really, really good time, and I was all in. And I think I'm more angry that he took me out of where I was than the fact that what he did was either right or wrong.
Yeah, and that's fair.
So maybe that's why it annoyed me so much, is he took me out of where I was, and I was really happy being there. And that's it. If you're happy watching a horror movie, that's also that's a needle to thread. But no, I was really happy watching this movie, and he got to the point, and he just took me out of that, and I was like, oh, you little butthead. But Lupita Nyong'o is our lead, our female lead.
Yeah.
So it stars Lupita Nyong'o, Winston Duke, Elisabeth Moss, and Elisabeth Moss. I know there's no echo.
No.
So, I want, if you're even a casual horror fan, I want to tell you to go see this movie.
Yeah. I think so. I mean, I think you have to at least have some appreciation for the genre. I do think it does. Whereas Get Out, I think, would appeal to art house people to a certain extent. I don't think this will nearly as much, although this is kind of following into what they call the elevated horror, which is the new buzz thing, in the sense that this is, yes, it's a horror movie, but it has more going on than just, it's not just your prototypical slasher film.
Well, it's
trying to do something else.
It's not legitimate if you can't put a label on it.
Yeah, maybe that's it.
So, yeah, it's just really, really impressed. I'm really, really... I hope he does another horror movie. I hope he's not sidetracked too much by his duties on the Twilight Zone reboot.
Yeah, but I think he's the thing about the Twilight Zone reboot is I think he's kind of overseeing it, and he is doing the intros and whatnot. But I think that he's probably more of a distant shepherd than he is, the one who's checking everything. But
he's the showrunner, not the
yeah, exactly. They're having other people write it and whatnot. I do think sometimes we forget how hard it is to make two good horror films, particularly in a row. There are a lot of people who make one really good horror film and then follow it up with two or three not so good horror films before they can figure out that fourth film that's good again, if that.
Yeah.
The fact that he's done two essentially horror films that are radically different and was successful in both is really impressive. Particularly, I think, when Get Out came out, no one was expecting it at all. So it had the luxury of really being a surprise.
Yeah.
And being sort of like, well, from who? From that guy? But but he's a funny guy, right? What is this? Although, I think we see a lot of comedians who are actually drawn to some of the horror films or whatnot. We saw that with the Halloween 2 as well, which was penned by some funny men. But I think we do have to acknowledge. I mean, it's pretty remarkable that he did a film, the second film, that everyone is going to look at it far more closely, that everyone is going to expect far more from. And while I don't know that I don't think it's a better film than Get Out, I do think it's a really, really good film. And I agree with you. I think it might be more accessible. And again, that's not easy to do. And, we're going to have to wait and see how big this goes this weekend. But, they're thinking over a $60 million opening, which really is insane. Like that was
Halloween that was Halloween numbers.
Yeah. Well, and it's just, and those numbers are bigger than, I don't know if they're bigger than ever ticket sales wise, but they're bigger than ever. I mean, sure, we saw some 20 and 30 million openings, but double that, and
see that number puts it ahead of Captain Marvel this week.
Well, yes. But yeah, I mean, Captain Marvel in its third week, is not Captain Marvel in its first or second week. So, no. But no, I mean that. Yes, honestly, I would imagine that Universal would be happy with anything over 30.
Right.
This weekend, like they'd be thrilled for anything over 30. So the fact that they might get 60 is pretty crazy. Now we'll have to see what happens. Horror films tend to be front loaded. Fridays tend to be great, and they kind of diminish throughout the weekend. That's partially because usually horror films appeal to a very niche audience.
Right.
whereas this one may have wider appeal simply because it's getting rather good reviews, which is fairly unusual for horror films. If you look back over the history, even some of the classic films when they came out were not very well reviewed.
Yeah.
I think part of that is a lot as the critics, a lot of the critics now were kids in the 70s and 80s and grew up on horror films and weren't ever like, oh, yes, it's pop culture-y, it's pulpy, it's not, but it was never like, oh, those are terrible movies. Why would you want to watch those movies? There were movies that you're like, no, I love that movie.
Right.
Is it Casablanca? No, but it's its own thing and it's really good.
Yeah, and everything as the youth grows up and becomes, the kind of the arbiters of, we'll call it culture because I don't want to think of another word right now. Things that previously maybe were looked askance at, they become more mainstream just because the audience is growing into those positions where their opinion actually, it always did matter, but it matters on a bigger scale.
Well, you got the people who are now professionals who are in the industry who were raised in a different cinematic environment, who grew up on Steven Spielberg and George Lucas and John Carpenter and whatnot. So yeah, but that said, I still think that regardless of the reviews that this film, I think a lot of people will dig it. I think a lot of people, I certainly want to see it again, partially to maybe try to start detangling what the social commentary is in there, but also because it's got quite a bit going on in it.
Yeah.
So I'm sure there's probably lots of little things that I didn't catch or that I didn't give as much attention to as I might on the second time through.
Mm-hmm.
And that's for a horror film, that's fairly remarkable because typically once all the answers are given to you, the horror film is like if it's a lower quality horror film, that's it. I mean, there's really nothing left. You know how everyone dies, who lives, and there's no real point in watching it again because the artistic value only goes so far.
But so let's make a comparison, and you'll know there's a reason for this. That this has the same, at least second viewing potential as, say, a Sixth Sense.
Yeah.
So, sure. Just to try to accumulate information.
Yes, but I would even say that Sixth Sense, after you watch it the first time and you're going through it the second time, you're looking for one specific thing or one specific aspect of that film's plot and trying to see if it lines up and it's like, but I think with this, it's even more complex than that. I think there's more going on that I've, and maybe I'm trying to read too much into it because of Get Out, but it just feels like that there's more depth in some of the ideas here than just checking the script to see if it's
internal logic.
Yes. Yeah. And there are a couple of things in the film that I thought, is this breaking its own rules? And I think there were like 2 or 3 points that I kind of thought that, but then it was like, well, okay, but who defined the rules of this? And, there's stuff in there that I want to revisit to see how I feel about it a second time.
Well, you mentioned that there's one big one for me, and we'll talk about it after I stop.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a couple things here and there that it's like, okay, that works thematically, but does it work? And I don't know, but did I enjoy the film? Yeah, I enjoyed the film, and I ended up giving it basically an 8 out of 10. And now that may dip, but if it dips, it's not dipping really any lower than a 7.
Yeah, no, I have no problem with that.
So, it is possible that it will essentially lose half a star or whatever. in reviewing, but that's still pretty solid. I take a 7 almost any day of the week, because that means that it accomplished what it wanted to accomplish and maybe a little bit more. And I mean, there is a glass ceiling for some of these films, and to a certain extent. So, while I don't think this is an instant classic, I think it's pretty close. I think it's really quite good, and hopefully it's kind of just the start of a good year for more horror movies.
Yeah, that'd be nice, wouldn't it? So 2 enthusiastic recommends.
Yeah.
For us. It opens Friday or Thursday night, depending on where your theater is. Check it out. Enjoy yourself. And don't overthink it. Don't overthink it. Till next time, I'm Mark. That's Ryan. Bye, Ryan.
Hey, see you guys.
And we will talk to y'all later.